Representative, you're familiar with the with Illinois state employment contracts and costs, aren't you?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
You are familiar with Illinois state employment contracts and costs, aren't you?
I used to be, yes.
Okay. Roughly how much is our total annual spending on state workers' salary and benefits?
Currently, I'm not sure.
I've been given the number $7 billion. Does that sound at least in the ballpark?
Again, I'm not sure.
Well, let's take that number. And then, are you familiar with the terms of the current negotiations between AFSCME and the Rauner administration?
No.
At all? You're not familiar with them?
No, I'm not in negotiations.
You haven't had any briefings at all on the negotiations?
It's against the law for those sides to divulge that.
You haven't read any of the newspaper reports or memos about the way about where the sides are in the negotiations?
Just from the governor.
Well, the number I've been given is that AFSCME is seeking a $1.6 billion increase in salaries over the next 4 years, which includes for some positions an almost 30% increase in salary over that period of time. Do you have any reason to doubt those numbers?
Again, I'm not in negotiations, so I can't take that.
So you have no reason to doubt the numbers?
I have no reason to believe they're true either.
Well, I mean, those are the numbers that the newspapers seem to be reporting and running with, so we'll just take them as true for the purpose of the questioning.
Well, the newspapers are always reliable, I'm sure.
Well, Representative, you've got 17 editorial boards against you and none for you, as best I can count. In fact, I was wondering if you read this morning's Moline Dispatch, particularly the editorial entitled, quote, "Let Costly Override Die, Get Back to Fixing the State," unquote. You know, your local paper's editorial board said this morning, quote, the bill, specifically written to target Governor Rauner, would almost certainly allow the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees to bypass a business-minded negotiator ready to play hardball and instead put terms of the contract governing more than 35,000 state employees in the hands of an unelected arbitrator, unquote. Do you disagree with your local paper's characterization of the bill?
Yes, I do.
Okay. On what basis?
There's a neutral arbitrator, but there is also two others on that panel, one being appointed by the governor and one by the employees union. And again, this does not mandate arbitration.
They're not elected arbitrators, though, are they?
They're governor appointees. They're appointed by someone who is elected, the governor.
However, they are not elected themselves.
Well, last time I checked, the governor hasn't been in negotiations. He's put somebody there to negotiate for him.
Well, your local paper continues saying that, quote, "That arbitrator would have no real responsibility to consider the interests of state taxpayers already facing huge tax hikes, to deal with what the bond rating agency," they're referring to Moody's, "now projects to be a $5 billion budget hole for the current fiscal year," unquote. So you disagree with their characterization of that bill, of the bill?
Yes, I do, because, again, they have to have the ability to assess the financial feasibility of the government entity being able to pay.
Well, the problem is the ability to pay is conditioned on the ability to tax, which we have an unlimited, at least up to the point where everyone leaves the state, ability in this chamber. And I, like Representative Tryon, have some experience at a municipal level, and interest arbitration, or impasse arbitration as it's called here, doesn't really seem to take into account taxes. If anything, the taxpayers of the unit of government that I'm experienced with seem to be treated more like a piggy bank than anything else. And as best I can tell, this bill doesn't change the current structure of interest arbitration in the state of Illinois. Now, our editorial board did go on. I'll come to the conclusion of this part of my questioning. But they said, quote, as Moody's warned in the short report it issued Monday, the state's biggest problem isn't even its continued failure to agree on a budget for the fiscal year that began July 1st. Instead, it remains a stunningly underfunded state pension system, already considered the worst in the nation. The states need to address that huge problem, and its continued failure to find a constitutional path to do so puts enormous pressure on Illinois' annual budget, quote, unquote. Do you agree with their assessment?
I'm not sure what the pension liability has to do with my bill.
Well, this is your editorial board discussing the broader issues that your bill raises, and in particular pointing out that they believe that the pension issue is, puts enormous pressure on Illinois' annual budget. Would you agree with their characterization?
Again, I'm not seeing what that has to do with my piece of legislation.
Well, I'll give you their conclusion. Quote, the next sentence. Given that, why in the world would lawmakers take action that could significantly increase state spending? And then their further conclusion and their request of their representative, we hope, this is a quote, we hope lawmakers will look beyond the political power of AFSCME workers and consider the cost to taxpayers of a measure that could make harder the already monumentally difficult challenge to fix our broke and broken state. Now, Representative, as I understand it, now you had clarified that you are not currently an AFSCME member, but you were an AFSCME member.
That is correct.
Right. I mean, you're proud of it. You've got it on your campaign website here. In fact, right here it says, in fact, that you were a treasurer and an executive board member of AFSCME. Is that correct?
Of my local.
Of your
local.
Again,
I'm not sure what that has to do.
Fair enough. Well, so you're very familiar with the structure of AFSCME. But tell me something. As I understand it, individual AFSCME members' dues are paid as a percentage of each member's paycheck. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay. Well, you had dues deducted from your paycheck, didn't you?
Yes.
And roughly what percentage of your paycheck was deducted by AFSCME?
At that time, it was flat. It wasn't based off of salaries.
Okay. Is it still flat, or is it salary-based today?
I'm not sure because, again, I'm not there.
Okay. Well, I know that in my local municipality, it's somewhere between 1% and 2% is what each union takes. Now, Representative, as well, don't mean to bring up a sore subject, but during the last debate on this bill, I pointed out that you had received roughly $350,000, and that's just in reported campaign donations from AFSCME over your past two election campaigns. Was that an inaccurate statement or an accurate one?
I'll take your word that that's how much they gave.
Well, Representative, isn't it a conflict of interest for you to sponsor a bill that directly and financially benefits the same government unit and its members that have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to elect and re-elect you to this Illinois House?
This does not guarantee any benefits to the members. Mr. Speaker, could we have...
I think those are your members. I'll go to the bill. Ladies and gentlemen, in the private union context, it's management versus labor. It's a fair fight with management on one side and labor on the other. In the government union context, instead of management, it's taxpayers on one side of the table and labor on the other. But there's a difference in the government union context. The taxpayers have to work through their elected representatives. And it can be a fair fight, but only if those elected representatives are willing and they are able to vigorously advocate for those taxpayers. Unfortunately, this bill is being promoted by those who are not willing to fight for the taxpayers, and this bill would strip the ability of the governor to work for the folks who elected him. This bill is a blatant attempt to reverse the results of the last election. Governor Rauner was elected by the people of our state to negotiate this contract, just as he has now successfully negotiated numerous contracts with the Illinois Teamsters Union. Moreover, if interest arbitration is right for all state and government employees, then it shouldn't just end in time for the 2018 elections. If this bill passes, AFSCME likely gets an over $2 billion increase in its contract benefits. This would turn the next election into a matter of whether there'd be a payout for AFSCME members or not. The Democrat governor wins, it would be payday for the union and its members. The Republican, not so much. This bill is just a direct transfer of taxpayer dollars into the pockets of folks and into their union. If they're paid by a percentage, you can think about the percentage. If it's 1%, that's $16 million over the next 4 years. If it's 2%, it's $32 million. If it's a flat fee, well, there's more money flowing around to be put into those Democrat political campaigns. It's a political payoff, pure and simple. The bill is so corrupt. It is corrupt, and it is so corrupt. It would make Rod Blagojevich blush. Please vote no.